Check now. I asked our producer, Manu Vieira, to prepare me a little video of some of the famous number 9s that Atletico Madrid fans have enjoyed in recent years, and I had to stop him from going back to the year 1944. This is what Manu's prepared for us. Great work there. We saw Kiko, we saw Vieri, we saw Hasselbank, we saw, who else did we see? Aguero, Forlan, Fernando Torres. The list of number 9s who've worn that red and white shirt has gone on. There was no Diego Costa there, and there was no Alvaro Morata, who's the latest candidate for a place in Atletico Madrid's pantheon of brilliant strikers. Now, Alvaro Morata's on great form. 5 goals in 5 games, 4 in 4 in La Liga. And the question is, Gemma, is he going to be the next epic hero number 9 for Atletico?
I think he has everything to be that player that the Wanda Metropolitano need. Actually, who believes it even more than me is El Cholo Simeone. He's the one that had tried to convince him come to Atletico when he was a Juventus player, when he was a Chelsea player. He managed that, and I think this could be the season for him. With Diego Costa not being that fit, I think he has to be the reference there, and he has done it already with that striking in the last games. He's having better records than Griezmann already. Atletico is not missing Griezmann, actually. They are not missing him, which is something quite impressive. And I think he's got everything, and he's got the support of El Cholo Simeone that arranges everything for him to sparkle. And I think it's the player bringing hope now to Atletico.
There's been a fascinating interview with Alvaro Morata very recently from another Spanish media, in which he talks very openly about almost falling into depression at his time, during his time in the Premier League with Chelsea, where he suffered through a very bad back injury, which he was receiving injections and then trying to get through a 90-minute game just a couple of days after travelling to Germany to receive treatment. He talks about throwing his telephone against the wall in despair when he received calls from well-wishers commiserating for the physical difficulties he was going through. And he talks about having chatted with his wife and having almost decided, look, I just want to get away from European football, get away from the pressure, and play perhaps in Dubai or in China, anything to find a bit of a quiet life. It's a fascinating interview because of where he is now and what he's doing at Atletico. And I think that represents what Gemma's talked about, the fact that with Cholo Simeone he's got a manager who clearly believes in him, but also the tremendous pressure you're under as a top-class player in the 21st century.
Absolutely, and that answers the question that I was making to myself: why is Morata not a top striker yet? Because the mental side of it is so important in football, but we don't see that part of players at home suffering and struggling. And then he says something that, for me, sums it up, that when he was playing for Chelsea, players looked up at him and didn't give him the ball because they were not expecting him to do anything. So that makes you smaller in the dressing room. So it must have felt really awkward, in that dressing room. And Cholo Simeone is the one who's bringing back Morata, being the player we all expected him to be, because that's why he's been at top clubs. You don't play for Juve, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, Chelsea without being a top striker. So I remember once watching a training session of Cholo with Griezmann and Mandzukic, how demanding he was about them scoring goals. That he wouldn't allow them to miss one header, to miss one volley, to miss one shot. So I'm assuming that he's doing the same with Morata, because Morata, he's got the speed, he's got the ability, he's got the touch, he's got everything to be a top striker, but we were all missing that killer instinct that I'm sure Cholo Simeone is working on it, and you see the results now, because you see him scoring week in, week out, and being the main man for Atletico Madrid. And if they are looking to bring another striker in the transfer window, it's not to replace Alvaro Morata, but it's to play alongside him.
We saw that lethal instinct in Atletico's second goal against Espanyol at the weekend. Diego Lopez, one of the most experienced keepers in La Liga, was beaten because Morata shot earlier than he expected him to. He's looking very sharp, isn't he?
I think that most of all, the way he positioned himself, the body, in order to immediately receive forward and shoot on the second touch was very important. This is the skill, the quality of the striker. None of us doubts on his quality. His last clubs speak also about him, expectations that were always there. And he always scored goals. The way I think that, or the difference that can be made this season has to do with something that this week I also read in one interview from a Portuguese, one of the most important Portuguese players and better players in the moment, telling that what gives me the burst to become better and make the things, to risk to make the things that I have to do, is the recognition of my work among my peers, my teammates in the locker room. It's not from the fans, it's from inside. When I feel that the other ones that are there with me trust me, I feel the strength, the power, the energy, and the will and capacity to indeed make the things. His interview speaks by himself. He said this today, that he feels this support. He spoke about the relation even with Diego Costa, that is fighting for a position, because I also think Morata plays better with a player behind him, not with two strikers indeed. Probably there's a communion of aspects that can lead for him to make a great season, and that will be fantastic for Atletico Madrid and Spanish football, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I know him a little bit without being close. I've met him and talked to him on and off the record. And one of the things that it's worth saying is that he's a little bit too nice. The array of people that you showed and the man who gave us in that clip, again, I've met or spoken to formally the majority of them. They're hard in terms of industrial rubber for characters. If things are going against them, they redouble their efforts. Now, Alvaro is not soft, but he's very friendly. He's very likable. It's possibly why we get on. It's a bit below the bear. This is the guy who believed, remember, that if specifically Sergio Ramos shaved his head, he'd score more goals. So they did it. Now, that's not in any manual that I know about. I also was quite friendly with them during the European Championships in France. Spain were living in a very open hotel complex by a beach on an island, and it was really hard to guard it. It had become close on the heels of the terrorist atrocities in Paris, at the Stade de France and at the Bataclan. And the security was really high, and two equivalents of the British SAS, but from France, were there guarding them, one of whom had lost part of his hand at the Bataclan in trying to catch the terrorists. And they were there day in, day out, embedded with the players. And the only guy, I was sad to hear, the only guy from the squad who engaged them in, how are you guys? What's your work like? What are you doing here? The only guy in this entire squad was Alvaro Morata, just simply out of human interest about, oh, what are you guys doing here? What's your job like? That's a plus in human terms. It marks him out as slightly individual. And at Chelsea, when he had this interview that you speak about recently, that everybody heard and enjoyed, missed out the fact that when he was at his most, when he was in utter despair, not just as a footballer, but a human, his girlfriend then said to him, you need to see a sports psychologist. And as many sports people do, he railed against it. If I open myself up, I'm weaker. But he did it, and it changed him. And it gave him building blocks that clearly, once his back was fixed, because he'd made a big mistake in trying to prove himself by playing through the pain twice. And when it's your back or concussion, you can't. So that was his own mistake. But then everything spiraled down, and the sports psychologist saved his career. So the love that he speaks about, that Miguel's picked out now, about feeling wanted and supported and feeling a kindredship with Costa, who for the third goal, I think, goes wide and plays wide and centres for Koke. That's Costa working harder than we've seen him for a year or two. So there's a feeling right now, not all season, but now at Atleti, all for one for all. That's the, and also I'll get out of this part of the chat, but I remember at Juventus, where some of the hardest people we've ever seen were Buffon, who suffered his own devils, but is a hard man, and Bonucci and Chiellini mocked Morata for being a little bit soft in the crucial moments. Said to him, you've got it, just like we've said, you've got everything. And Bonucci spoke publicly, which didn't do Morata any favours, about saying he's a little bit soft. He isn't killers like us at Turin. This is where he lacks a little bit. And then they went out at the end of that season and they utterly bossed him when Italy, Conte's Italy, knocked Spain out of the Euros in Paris. And those three guys went, he's no threat. If we do this, he's no threat. As an elite striker, one, you can't allow that to happen. And two, during the game, 15 minutes into being bossed by people, you have to go out, I'm going to do you. I'm going to beat you. Anything. I'll do anything to trick you, to swindle you, to go past you. It doesn't matter. And he's only at 27 developing that now. And I think that for the rest of his career, he'll, you know, he's a Summer of Love guy. He's 1967, not 1977 punk rock. You know, it's Wear a Flower in Your Hair, Alvaro Morata. But in that, then, you know, he makes beautiful music.
But he win them, Bonucci, Chiellini. I mean, he brought them to the final of the Champions League.
Scoring against Madrid.
Scoring against the team that created him. So,
Gemma, if I didn't articulate properly that I really like him, I'm a fan, you're right, he did that. And I think they were wrong to speak out about a teammate because it was teasing. It wasn't like this. But they did him no favours, and so I was trying to say I think they shouldn't have said this.
You know,
but he said something true.
There's one thing very, very important, is that the health of the locker room, you see it sometimes in these details. I'm not speaking that about, because he speaks more about Chelsea. There he had tough times. Sometimes the competition that they have among themselves is so hard that they cannot be good teammates. And for soft player, for some it's a stimulus to overcome yourself. For some others, it's the difference between you taking out the best you have or going down and falling. And if you have after, at the same time, some injury, some personal problem, the coach, well, has other solutions, chooses another one and don't push you up, it's a difference. I remember one player, he's playing now here in Spain, Facundo Ferreira. Yeah. I met him in Shakhtar. I was in that time coach of second team, and he was not playing first team. He was always coming to play in my team. And when Paulo Fonseca got as coach of Shakhtar, and I was his assistant there, he pushed the best out of Facundo, and Facundo started making goals out of nothing. He made 30 and something goals and made an incredible season just because people believed in him and worked